The Big Red Couch, a podcast about making role-playing games. A group of GMs and players draw ideas from the mystery box and bring their game pitches to you. In which our heroes draw a card.
Shall we draw a card?
We have a guest drawer this week.
Indeed.
Hi, I'm the guest drawer.
That's Tonya, and she's pulling a card from the box of mystery as we
Looking
speak.
the other way.
About to be subjected to the terrible handwriting. Good laugh.
Raised by Space Wolves.
Woo! Guess who's been waiting for that one?
Enjoy, guys.
Alright. See you next time.
Some days later,
Hello, listener. Welcome back to the Big Red Couch, addressing the topic raised by Space Wolves. Due to unforeseen circumstances of sleeping like a caffeine-addicted coke fiend, Kev will not be joining us because his input would be limited to sitting on the couch and drooling softly.
Occasionally making non sequiturs that would be funny to us, but probably wouldn't make much sense to you.
They are pretty funny non-sequiturs. Today we have myself, Craig.
Ben.
And Tonya.
We've tried a 3-person cast before, so we'll see how this one rolls.
Yeah, this may come out just a tiny bit shorter than usual.
We are very lazy people.
And possibly without the inventive profanity, which realistically is a lot of what Kevin brings to the table.
So who's going to lead off with our wonderful idea?
Do you, first of all, want to explain your plan for the podcast? Because it's kind of interesting.
That's true, actually. I was having real trouble coming up with an idea for the prompt raised by Space Wolves. And I was hoping someone who was actually involved with the incident would explain where it comes from. I was thinking I could then go through my process for coming up with an idea live on air.
Yes, because indeed, thereby hangs a tale. Raised by Space Wolves is meaningless to most people, but we have been using that as a phrase to denote someone who's trying too hard to make their character a unique, perfect snowflake, possibly.
And that person, in the case of this particular story, is Ben.
It was me. It was all my fault.
And yet he suffers no guilt or shame. And really, listener, that's the tragedy of this little tale.
I don't see it that way, but that's fine.
Yes, but that's because you're wrong.
So very wrong.
So what was the game that we were actually setting up for when this happened? I can't remember.
I think this was part of the protogenesis of the Traveller's End game. Because we wanted to run a serious sci-fi, because we have some history with hard sci-fi books and excitement about coming up with real scenarios in which space travel is involved, in which dealing with sort of hazards you come across in space would be a cool thing to do. And at least at some point when Craig was coming up with the setting for Traveller's End...
As an explanation, it was called Traveller's End because essentially, we put the...
Millennium's End and Traveller in a big jug and shook it hard until something came out.
Yes, so we were using the Millennium's End system, which is on the crunchy side, depending on your definition of crunch.
It was a highly mechanically accurate representation of being shot in the face and a game.
True, you can be shot in 2 different locations in the head alone. The crotch is its own location.
That is not...
Yeah,
that's not just Millennium's End that does that.
Back in the day...
So is the hand.
Back in the day, that happened more often than not.
Well, true, but you could go for the gratuitous nutshot in this game.
And yes, the rules supported that level of accuracy, shall we say, air quotes, air quotes.
So yes, it was a science fiction game using Millennium's End system.
And yeah, the feel of... I thought it was a specific version of Traveller, or at least where your characters get smothered in the crib anyway. But yeah, the idea of fairly adventurous but crunchy science fiction setting. Because it was cool, and we nearly finished that game.
We could possibly do, at some point, an episode or two on here is the backstories of various games we've run, with a strict proviso that if anybody starts doing let me tell you about my character, they get squirted with a water bottle or something.
Fair enough.
I endorse this product and also...
And this is where I went, let me tell you about my character. Anyway.
I'll get the hose.
For some reason, I was convinced it would be hilarious in this hard science fiction, crunchy, let's have rules for vacuum exposure and so forth kind of game to run a character who was effectively a primitive. And I said, I want my character to be, raised by wolves.
It's a space game, Ben.
It could be raised by space wolves.
And then we ignored him for about 10 minutes and got on with the game.
As these things happen.
But we kept coming up with the notion of somebody who was raised by space wolves. And what are space wolves? How would they work? And so I guess, with a bit of luck, you'll find out some of that over the course of this episode.
I do remember it coming up again and again in conversations with different people. I think there was Gulo T came up with the concept of a wolf standing on a lonely asteroid.
In a spacesuit with a bubble helmet.
In a spacesuit with a bubble helmet. And there being this... Ow! Okay, that's creepy, but how the hell did they get this frequency? And the whole concept of trying to smuggle Cuttlebone through space hamster territory, and it kind of grew its own life. So we've had this setting of uplifted everything rattling around in our heads for years, and nothing really to hang off it because it's just too big.
Great. Was that the setting you were going to run with? Was that your...
I was going to touch on that one, but I actually came up with something else.
Mm-hmm. The implication in that setting we have never used or properly exploited is that it's an uplift scenario where everything is uplifted, but humanity is possibly absent from the picture, or certainly no longer in
I
control.
don't think that really ever came up. It was just, whether humanity was there or not was kind of
Irrelevant
by this point. Yeah, anyway, so having this huge environment, I was thinking to myself, it's too big an environment to have things to push against. And what makes a story is having limitations and having things to exceed, I find. Mm-hmm. So the process that I go through with making any storyline is what are the limitations that characters can push against. And where you know who the characters are, some of those limitations can be internal, but with a role-playing game, you don't necessarily have an idea of who those characters are because they haven't been written yet. They can't be written until after the scenario. So what I would do at this point is start putting in limitations like, okay, we have a game, we know there's going to be between 3 and 7 players, depending on how gung-ho the GM is about marshalling a large group of people. So this has to be a fairly small environment, or a small subsection of an environment. So what are the limits? What are the walls that keep these people together, that make sure that these people are going to be interacting? And in a space environment, the obvious thing to go for is, this is the crew of a ship.
Mm-hmm.
Then you start thinking about, okay, the political environment. There's lots of different species around. Is there any reason to limit the kinds of species that are on this ship? And the only reasons I can think of would be environmental necessity. So it's very unlikely that you're going to have uplifted cicadas in the same environment as uplifted dolphins, because one or other of them is going to be suffering really badly in an environment designed for the other.
Probably, yes.
Although why you would uplift a cicada, I have no idea.
How you would uplift a cicada. Yeah, that would be...
Yeah, that's just an idea pulled from my bottom there, so feel free to leave that to one side. If you have an environment with a mixture of species, do you have areas where the ship would be travelling through where basically you need different people to have face time with their own folk? Are there going to be problems? What's going to be creating problems for these folk? And I was thinking that having something internal is probably more exciting for players than having external pressures. So this is starting to become a little bit more bulldogsy in my head of, if you've got a crew of people who have been given a cargo and there is something to do with that cargo that means that individuals on the crew may not wish to complete the journey the way they have been contracted to. Yeah, I'm starting to think maybe a genetics setup. I just had the sudden idea of perhaps the ship is a salvage vessel and they've gone to a quiet corner and found a genetics lab, because genetics is a theme for this environment anyway.
Yeah.
You've got people of different species who have been attempting to uplift something or create something. Maybe somebody's been trying to reverse engineer a human, or reverse engineer something that has been extinct and something else that's been extinct for a while.
Yeah, it sounds like you're going for a small-scale political sort of thing. Maybe it's like the herbivores versus the carnivores, or...
I wasn't really thinking along those lines, but that could be interesting too.
Yeah, I was thinking of the way you're talking about there being divisions between, or different motivations in the party. Yeah, and it could fall down to, it could be like a pack-structured species versus like independent hunters or things like that. So there could be political rifts between the members of the party, or at least different ways of thinking, different ways of approaching problems.
Yeah.
It could be very much hung on the hook that this is the wolf clan, or this is the hamster clan, hamster hegemony, as I like to think. Yeah, and whatever spurs that on, like, say, a relic from the progenitors or something like that, or the last freeze-dried human or something like that.
Yeah, well, it could be as simple as we found this genetics lab. It's really old. We're a salvage vessel. We found an old, empty genetics lab, but there's pockets of air around. Something's alive in here.
Mm-hmm.
Is it one of the people who made it? And you could have this whole religious ruction of what if it's a human? You'll have people who are post-human uprising supporters and who are almost religiously devoted to progenitor race. You could have, and that might have nothing to do with your species. On the other hand, you might also have this space is designed for people who are this shape. That tells me this is carnivore territory. We're herbivores. We are fucked if we don't get out of here. Versus, what's the problem? They'll be part of the pack. I don't know.
The idea of, in that sort of scenario, that sort of game, digging into the history of why this weird-ass situation came about would be very cool. I mean, the idea that if humanity is out of the picture, finding out why someone went to the trouble of making hamsters with 120 IQ.
Because we could.
Apparently. But presumably they put something in their business case to explain why that was a good idea.
Why did somebody uplift and vacuum adapt giant squid?
Yeah.
What was the goal there?
Fucking cool.
Well, yeah.
It would be off the chain, as they say. Anyway, so that's about where I would kind of leave it to mull for a bit to see if more specifics would fall out. So, yeah. There we have the genesis of an idea live on air. Ta-da! Woo!
One thing I would be interested in hearing more about is how you'd approach the uplift process, whether it would be...
I think it'd be relevant.
Actually, I think it may be more relevant than you think. If the idea is that the creatures are being... If they have a strong physical identity and you've just made them smarter and a little bit more adaptable, like, say, wolves are wolves, they're wolf-shaped and they do wolf-type things, they just happen to know how to operate spacecraft now. They're still marking territory and operating as a pack, and you've...
Okay, now my brain just threw up the, okay, how do you organise a spacesuit so that you can pee on shit?
Double airlock system and pressurization.
Yeah, fair enough. Also catheter, or do you organise a squirt system into the suit, or are you relying on physical squirt?
I think you squirt into the suit and then the suit takes care of the interface, as it were.
Fair enough, okay.
Or you just basically use a mass driver in the ship's sanitary systems.
Oh, okay, so you're marking as a ship rather than as an individual.
So
okay,
you just
right.
mark with a cubic meter of frozen wolf pee. And just smash it into the side of the thing. Hard enough to leave a dent, but not actually punch it.
Ours.
Or maybe the uplift process is like a transhuman or possibly a transcephalopodian thing. Not being octopus, I'm not sure how they relate to the world, but it could be in a vastly different way to the way that other creatures, that they could be a step halfway towards energy beings or so forth. They may just find that, as long as their intellect is preserved, put them in a box, strap into some rockets, they're just going to zoom around and do strange things in space rather than in water. It may not be as relevant to them, that sort of thing. So
Okay, so I think I have been assuming that the uplift process is chemical in some way, that you are splicing things in from other species to basically give people, at the very least, mental capabilities that they wouldn't have had before. Yeah. But I am viewing it as kind of speeding up what would have happened anyway. So you've got you've taken creatures from their native environment, putting them in a space environment, and over time they're going to adapt. We're just doing it a bit faster than we would ordinarily.
What that made me think of was Frederick Pohl's More Human Than Human, where a guy is sent to Mars, but to make him capable of surviving, he is radically altered. And him coping with that process is basically the story. The notion could be entirely like a biogenetic kind of adaptation, but maybe some of the creatures are attempting to approach human as a template. Maybe they're using what they've recovered from human gene stocks to become this perfect, wonderful creator species. which is just funny in and of itself. Maybe some of them, and the things I've seen from David Brin's Uplift series, I could quite happily imagine dolphins augmenting their abilities, giving themselves tools and cool things, but basically wanting to remain dolphins.
Yeah.
It's,
what the hell purpose does a dolphin have for arms, honestly?
Well, if they have a brain implant and some Waldos they control remotely, and they're not, they'd get the impression that would be cool. They would love that sort of stuff. They want to go.
I'm also envisaging new symbioses coming up, so that you've got things like a think together between octopodes and dolphins. So you've got, we can manipulate all the things. What do you want me to do, Dave?
It'd be interesting to explore those kinds of ideas around. It sounds like it would be an excellent collaborative sort of thing, just because otherwise the GM would have to come up with logical reasons for the way everything was, rather than have a bunch of people pitch things into the pot that they find interesting and kind of building from there.
I don't see that as being much of a problem, because if you're going into a lot of detail about how the world works, then it's like you're preloading for a really serious game.
Mm-hmm.
If nobody's interested in going into that much detail, then you're playing a less serious game with some slightly cartoony elements. So be it.
Yeah, as you want to know that in advance, of course. But
Bulldogs strikes me as a good approach to this. I did actually sit down with bulldogs and try to make up space hamsters. And it took about 20 minutes to make up a space hamster species template.
Sweet. Did
Ridiculously
you
easy.
make up a habitation / space environment for them as well?
Don't really need to. I mean, you just say, what's it going to be? It's going to be a gigantic space station that, if seen from the right angle, does in fact look like a wheel spinning in space.
It has lots of habitrail things weaving around it.
Yeah, it has tunnels and has things you can climb and has the sort of environment that has as seen to like.
No windposts every 20 feet.
Indeed.
Little water droplet dispensers.
Well, that's a nice thing in a low-gravity environment, which you potentially have is something that just releases a ball of water that floats very slowly across a gap and then disappears into the basin on the other side. You just sort of lean in, grab a ball of water, on your way.
Nice.
You would definitely need exercise wheels, though. Bone density issues and muscle atrophication.
Indeed. There's probably very nasty jokes made about hamsters in those circumstances.
I'm not surprised. They strike me as dicks. We've always characterised them as being horrible, belligerent sods for some reason. And
I think just
meta hamster.
I think it's just the notion of these tiny little balls of fur and a bladder that...
To be fair, that's more guinea pigs than hamsters.
No, that's fair, yeah.
The last hamster I met was perching on the brain case of a very sedate old tomcat.
Gosh, just sitting on the cat's head.
Yeah, the cat is sitting there going, "Oh my god, I hate my life," and the hamster's going, "No-ni-no, no-ni-no-ni-no, my foot itches, ang-ang-ang."
Maybe it's a nice warm spot on a cat's head. Or maybe hamsters are dicks.
well, that's the thing I found, that the etymological origin of hamster may be a Persian word meaning invader. Possibly they had trouble with population numbers at one point. Rampaging hordes of hamsters. Little furry horned hats.
That would be awesome. Tiny little studded leather armour. Like Barding with fur sticking up the gaps.
So, who else has got an idea?
Well, I had sort of two idea fragments. There was the one that's very much the same as the base setting of, we have a solar system inhabited by uplifted almost everything, but no humans. What I'd thought of in terms of the game is having, and it's riffing on a book that I was trying to look up, but I can't find, so I'll see if I can find it and put it in the show notes. I seem to recall it being called something like The Quiet Place, or This Quiet Place, something like that. Possibly written by Pat Cadigan, again, not sure. I will have to check and get back to you. But it basically concerned a crew who were out testing an experimental space drive. And this has certain relativistic warping effects. And allows you to cover great distances. And it was expected that it would take them about a year in their time and about 9 years real time. Except it turns out that navigation was very difficult. And it took them a very long time to get back. And by the time they get back to Earth, technological civilization has collapsed. There's just nothing left. And the rest of the story is them essentially having a really horrible time for most of the rest of their lives. It's kind of a down
Thanks,
book.
Pat.
Yeah, it was just kind of a, wow. It's a good book, but Jesus.
So you think you need a run-up to, kind of like Steel Beach?
Yeah. But it sort of got me thinking of taking the basic idea of that, of a human ship that, back at the very start of space travel and everything, was testing a faster-than-light drive.
Yep.
Possibly they actually had some uplifted crew members, possibly not. Things go wrong out there and it takes them a while to get back, and by the time they get back, the solar system is filled with uplifted everything, and there are no humans. And nobody knows where the humans went. There are records that there were humans. People, regardless of species, know that there were humans. They disappeared long enough ago that nobody alive has ever met one, obviously. And it's just the humans vanished one day and nobody knows why.
Okay.
That being potentially the central story of the game, of just what the hell happened. Did the entire human race simultaneously hit singularity and vanish? Did they do the traditional science fictional thing of they all set out for the outer rim of the galaxy? What's the story?
Okay, so you have this one ship coming back that has a mixed crew.
Potentially, or maybe it's a depending on how much of a fish out of water scenario you want to put people in, it's a non-mixed crew. They get back.
So you've got a Humi crew coming back to a totally non-human environment. They're magically able to communicate, because that would make for a really boring game if they weren't.
I've done games with language troubles. They are a pain in the ass. It's the sort of thing that can work really well in an environment where you can do subtitles.
Not really an option for roleplay.
Not a good. I've never found a good way of doing it in an RPG. If our listener happens to have run into a good way of doing language troubles in an RPG that isn't funny for a session and then really annoying for every subsequent session, write us a note. I'd love to know. I really would. That was the setup. I mean,
are the players the people discovering this human-infested ship, or are the players the humans?
I was initially thinking of it from the point of view of something in the graphic novel or comic line, in which case they would be the human crew of the ship encountering this strange new world. They wouldn't necessarily have to be for a game. You could have mixed crew, allows you to get around the horrendous humanocentric nature of the premise quite nicely. Alternatively, I'm not entirely sure how you'd work having the players as people of varying species discovering this human-infested ship. Quite where they go from there, I'm not sure.
I can see it going in a number of directions, because you can have that's weird. How do we find food for these things? Well, I guess they're simians of a sort. Let's call the Pongo Ranch and see if the Rillas will put them up.
Actually, potentially, if it's a ship that I had initially been assuming, it's a ship with a jump drive, but what if it's, it might have some sort of FTL drive that isn't that much F-er, as it were, than L.
So you're thinking more generation than...
Oh, possibly cold sleep. Yeah. So you go into a ship, and there's a bunch of humans on the ship. What the hell do we do?
Okay, so they're not even thought out yet.
It's an idea that sort of struck me now, because you've potentially got the circumstance of, okay, there are some people who are going to welcome these guys with open arms. There's some people who are going to want to study them by means of dissection. There are some people who are just going to want to pilot the entire ship into the sun. Do we take on the job of protecting these guys?
That could be cool. That could definitely
could be cool, yeah. Okay, I'm
vaguely a Tully from the C.J. Cherry Shanua books?
Yeah, although he was awake at the time.
But he's very much human, completely out of his element. I mean, given that it's C.J. Cherry, he's freaking out a lot, because...
And, stranger in a strange land kind of thing was something that the human among aliens thing is definitely one of CJ's
True, she has done that one. Sometimes it's the alien among humans. I think Rim Runners had that. I found with her books there's always one character who's just, to be polite, a head case. Sometimes it's someone like Tully who's just totally out of context. Sometimes it's somebody who went through a jump without taking the necessary drugs and is kind of deranged. There's always someone.
And the Foreigner Invader series, so forth. It's a guy,
the one human,
the guy who is trying to think in two cultures at once.
Yeah, trying to think in a culture that almost seems to be run. Its entire language is based off numerology.
I kind of like that.
That was a great series of books.
Absolutely. Enjoyed the hell out of it. Anyway.
I tried to come up with another idea based off Raised by Space Wolves, and I'll note that I'm avoiding the really obvious one.
I'm not, so go ahead.
Oh, you're going with the really obvious one?
Yeah, I'm going with the really
awesome.
obvious one.
Okay, great stuff. I know almost nothing about them, which is what... I was just sort of thinking, this one came to me while, oddly enough, I was doing the dishes this morning. I presumably should do dishes more often.
I came up with my best ideas while doing dishes in the shower.
Would explain the noodles. Actually, thinking about it, this one also links back to CJ Cherry, which is a little bit interesting. I was going with sort of Space Wolves, because Space Wolves sounds kind of cool. And then got back to Sea Wolf and the whole World War II German submarine wolf pack.
Uh-huh.
And just essentially that just started sort of spinning around in my mind. And there's another one of the CJ Cherry universes or branches of universe, which I think is the Alliance Merchanter series.
I have not read that one.
What you essentially have is that there has been a war between Earth and the colonies. The war eventually ground to a halt, but one of the admirals took some of the warships and essentially went rogue and is still, to some degree, out there. Nobody's 100% sure what the hell he's up to. There's ships around. There's one or two books that deal... Well, there's one book I can think of that deals specifically with a ship that is heavily involved in this. It is somebody signing on to this ship is asked in a very direct way, you know what kind of ship we are, don't you? Because, there's this...
Nothing about signing the articles. You are going rogue by coming aboard.
Yeah, you're never getting off the crew of this ship. Not alive. This kind of thing.
So how does this get back to Space Wolves?
Well, this gets back to Space Wolves of the idea of, raised by Space Wolves. If you have an environment like that, you have a branch of a military which has gone rogue, which is operating in secret. If you don't have sort of, I jump from one place to another in the blink of an eye, if you've got ships that actually take time to travel, people are going to age. People on these ships are going to form relationships. They're going to have children. They're still people. Maybe there's a battle. They fight against somebody. If those battles go along enough, you're going to end up with orphans and kids on the ship.
Okay.
And so, I hadn't sort of thought of so much children of actual ship's crew, but more what happens if one of these rogue military vessels, under heavy disguise somehow, they come into a station, they resupply, possibly legitimately, possibly at the point of a laser cannon, who knows, and then they find there's a stowaway. Very much the classic running away to seek your fortune in the open spaceways, or possibly just running away because anywhere's got to be better than this.
Okay. I'm getting a Citizen of the Galaxy vibe here.
A little bit, yeah. Like I said, it wasn't a particularly well-formed idea, but it was just the notion of what happens when you fall in with what is essentially a group of military pirates. Shades of Treasure Island, I grant you.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, I'm picturing something maybe a little more organised than that, because if this has been going on for long enough, then you're going to have problems with supplying the personnel necessary to run the ships properly. So you may end up with a situation where part of what the ram raids are for is to steal a bunch of kids. So you can breed on board, and that's going to get you a certain number of...
There's a hell of a turnaround time.
There's a hell of a turnaround time, and you've got the people you're raising are not necessarily going to be fit for the jobs you need. And it may well be that growing up in space does some weird things to the way you grow, and you actually need planet-based...
Ooh.
So they're kind of Vikings.
Yeah.
If you've got to get to puberty, say, under a gravity field, then that suggests these...
You've got pirates.
Why do I always end up with space pirates?
Because you're obsessed. We're moving on.
It's logical. the logical conclusion to all of your thoughts.
Arr!
You could have, basically, the pirates dropping off a batch of kids and stealing the same number.
If you want to be less creepy-ass, it could be a legitimate exchange for, to keep people's genetic stocks varied. And, you hand over a bunch of skinny teenagers who know how to fix anything, and you take in a bunch of lumpen sons of the soil who can actually...
survive the atmosphere that they're going to be flying in.
Yeah. It could be a little bit more genteel than...
Yeah.
We've really come for your children's.
Yeah, pretty much. Could be a cultural exchange and, that tentative meeting of tribes where they realise that, everyone's eyes get a little too close together.
Well, an idea that just struck me now is if you've got... I quite like the idea of the fallen military, essentially space piracy thing, and they possibly have their base out there, so somewhere there is, the planet of High Tortuga, because why not? Where the various families and kids being raised might be. But if, the further out from places of order goes, the more that line between dodgy merchantman and pirate starts to blur. And so a ship comes in, everybody knows what they are. I mean, if the war was big enough and well enough documented, people can probably look up in the books and say, yes,
You're that ship.
Yeah.
Or, last time we saw that ship, it sure as hell wasn't painted that colour.
Yeah, that's the former Earth expeditionary vessel New Amsterdam, last seen in military service 300 years ago, but looking through the books.
Yeah.
But, they turn up, they're there to trade cleanly, people are willing to pretend that they're the vessel city of New York, because nobody's ever going to figure that one out, and everything's fine, and along the way they might mention, hey, we need some more crew.
Okay.
It does remind me of something from, I cannot remember the name of I'm going to have a lot of books to look up. There's a book series about a trading ship called Glory, basically a solar sailing trading ship.
Mm-hmm.
And it does mention the whole thing of these things being the vessels that took people out to colonize other worlds, and then the crews just kind of stayed aboard and is sailing these enormous ships around trading. And the whole thing of, when one of these ships arrives in system, well, you might only get one every 3 generations.
Mm-hmm.
And, when one of them arrived in the system at this frankly dour and depressing world, and they needed a new crew member and they were looking for somebody of particular qualities, and it's kind of a thing of, well, they're not going to kidnap anybody, but if we can't find them somebody, that ship's never coming back here. And that's how they got the guy who eventually became their captain.
Not so much Shanghaied as...
it's not even gunboat diplomacy. It's just this is the nature of the world that you're living in.
Not so much Shanghaied into the service. It's actually like being offered up as a... It's like, I want to go to space. Shut up.
Shut up and tend your root vegetables.
Okay, so in this environment, who are your players? Crew members?
I'm not 100% sure. Much like the previous one, I'm not 100% sure. For a relatively managed game, you could have a lot of fun with the players starting out as dock rats picked up somewhere, either after a battle or just in a trading thing. I mean, after a battle would be kind of fun. Who are aboard this ship, and then maybe you do a game where you come back to them every few years.
Okay.
Skill up the characters a bit.
See who they are.
Yeah, see
the
who
next
they
time
become.
they hit planet.
So, eventually what you've got is the captain, first officer, chief engineer, and I'm going to go with a horrendous cliche of chief medic.
Okay.
On board this pirate vessel who've worked their way up.
Not Storesman.
Through the years. If I was going to be blatantly riffing on the works of Nathan Lowell, then yes, I would have gone with Storesman. I was going for more of a Star Trek vibe.
Okay.
I did think Storesman.
I liked those books too.
Yeah, so that's basically what I came up with.
Sweet.
Sort of a half-formed something. You could get a certain amount of way if you decide not to go with the warm and fluffy idea. And again, this sort of takes raised a bit out of the question. You potentially, if you're doing it as a con game, you have the players as people who were shanghaied from a station or from another ship. These are people who are now living with and being trained in the arts of spacecraft and combat by the people who they know murdered their families.
Okay.
So you've got some drama there, and then you put them in a circumstance where something's happened to the ship. Was it Unreal, the game Unreal, that started with this, like a prison ship that's crashed?
Yeah.
That kind of vibe where there's something happened to the ship. A lot of people are injured, a lot of systems are damaged. You're basically okay at this point. What are you going to do?
What is the opposite of Stockholm Syndrome?
Yeah. Yeah, what happens when Stockholm Syndrome has not happened, and instead what's happened is that the people who've kidnapped you have taught you how to murder and run the ship?
I think that's a situation where you just got a promotion.
Yeah, you find out just how many times you can space the same man and he's still alive. Just imagining pirate on a bungee cord at just the right place. Open the airlock, he goes whooshing out just enough for you to wave to him, and in the air the bungee cord retracts, sucks him back in, you close the airlock and refresh your eyes. So you get to watch him doing the over and over again. Okay, this really could turn into the torture porn RPG so easily.
You just revitalised keel hauling, you realise?
Yeah.
Dude. Oh, that's messed up.
Yes.
And before we go any more piratical, Ben, what was your idea?
For the love of God, what was your idea?
You're going to like this because it's grimdark as all hell.
Oh, great.
Not grimdark, no!
Alright, so back when I was a spotty teen, and not obviously much different to be...
You're less spotty and you have a beard now.
Yes, indeed.
And you're not a teenager.
I played quite a bit of Warhammer 40k.
Garsp.
back first edition Rogue Trader. Don't talk to me about any of these battle nuns or necrons, whatever the hell's going on now. Give me Zotes and I'll be happy. No one will get that.
I got nothing. The battle nuns I got, the necrons, Zotes.
I have no idea what a Zote is. I'm just going to nod.
It sounds like a unit of space currency.
Oh, good. No. The Zotes got pitched out after the first book. They're basically Teenage Mutant Ninja Centaurs. They're kind of a sort of greenish, reptilian-ish centaur species.
Fair enough.
That and a bunch of other stuff is how I wind up Games Workshop employees when I ever go to the store. Because Games Workshop is a very effective merchandising machine who makes what I understand is a good game, but I personally could not financially keep up with. And they're very, very good at selling their product to an audience who refreshes constantly and have access to their parents' checkbooks.
Pretty much.
Yeah. And as a business strategy, it seems to be working great.
However, every time you walk in there, you say, "Got any Zotes?" And they say, "Huh?" And you walk out again.
Pretty much.
Right.
Sounds like the duck joke, but anyway.
Warhammer 40k, the grim darkest dark ever. Blacker than the blackest black times infinity. Yep.
I have stared into the Stygian depths of Nietzsche's abyss and seen the cold metallic glint of Vin Diesel's eyes staring out at me. Yep.
Fair enough. And just to recap quickly, the universe hates humanity, humanity hates itself. To defend humanity, which is becoming a laughably thin concept at this point, they have created the Space Marines, who are basically humanoid tanks, genetically engineered and cybernetically enhanced to kill shit, placed inside armour which no one completely understands anymore, and because it's from the lost age of science, they repair and maintain through liturgical rites and following rote instructions as if they were scripture. And the Space Marines come in chapters with many varieties of badass.
One of which, in this case, would be the Space Wolves, I'm guessing.
Bingo! Yep.
Okay.
The Space Wolves are a particularly Nordic-themed, big shaggy wolf pelt, come from an icy planet which is all sorts of fucked up, and they're the hardest hard bastards according to their chapter book, just like all the others, the Blood Angels.
Yeah, just like the Ultramarines are also the hardest hard bastards.
We're a little worried about the Getty Corps.
Yeah. And it follows the normal, and I completely understand the appeal of this slightly histrionic approach to this sort of thing. And just turning over my head, I thought, what would it be like to be raised in this order from what I'm going to assume are approximately normal human worm babies, and going through the process of living in a religious order devoted to shooting things in the face. And
in the name of the Emperor.
In the name of the Emperor, because, that's...
that shit's important.
It is.
Because you don't want to miss that bit out. And as I say, humanity hates itself in as much as humanity's defenders are no longer entirely human. The humanity's Emperor is a...
giant psychic guy who has been...
He's been in a coma for a couple of millennia now, and has just been...
I think he's been... From memory, he is 50,000 years old.
Yeah.
He has quite possibly been dead for the last 10,000 years.
And is being
but
sustained...
nobody's going to admit that.
Is being sustained by the souls of psychics, who they just basically shovel into the...
A life support system that I think is the size of a city, or possibly covers a continent on Earth.
Yeah. So...
That is a very big chair.
It is
I think the chair's in the middle of it, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it is. Okay. So, yeah, it's the universe has a certain morbid tone, which is why people play orcs. Because
does explain why so many of the stories that are set in this universe are covered with a liberal gloss of man pain. Also spikes, but that's another issue entirely.
Yes, I'm Spidey Grimdark.
And makes the Caiaphas Cain stories so hilarious.
It does.
I should read some of this. Dan Abnett and...
Dan Abnett, I've read his Imperial Guard books, which are very good. That's sort of regular people, not...
Yeah.
I think it's Sandy...
Don't look at me. I haven't read them.
Sandy something or other. I've forgotten the name.
Okay. We researched
I
it
can
later.
find this out. I should be over here. No, I'm seeing more and more down in the Abnett. I'm not seeing the rest of them.
That's okay. We can find that out
It'll
later.
bug me now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll fix it in post. It'll be awesome.
Anywho, okay. So the idea the characters are playing younglings, or whatever they're referred to as,
Privates.
or novates, or initiates into the order.
Ooh.
Nice.
So and they are effectively being fed into the sausage grinder of the Space Wolves chapter house. And to be fair, I have since I read the original books, played the game 20 odd years ago, and since then the things that I have come across have been a couple of video games, which I haven't played very much of, and occasional eye-glazing conversation with folks who are really keen on the universe and the games. So I am taking this from a not deeply informed and slightly cynical viewpoint.
Deeply non-expert
Apology
opinion.
Indeed. That is the finest I can offer. But the idea that they are being put through the process of being selected to see if they are worthy of becoming, say, because I believe that they do a bunch of cloning and shit as well. But presumably there are some openings for new blood, I hope, of possibly becoming a Marine or becoming one of the servitors, which are technical specialists, which I believe are largely robotic. But the idea that the players are going through this graduation process. And it would be kind of like, your school days, Harry Potter kind of story, except what the end is becoming becoming a soulless killing machine named the Emperor.
Okay, so this actually feels more like a board game or a card game, because the process of becoming a soldier is normally pretty rigid. Or are you running the game around exercises, and this is what the kids get up to when nobody's looking?
It would be putting a series of instants, actually a little bit like the process in like Starship Trooper, where they go through, the training is interrupted by a tragedy or something like that. So basically seeing how the characters react, seeing if the changes that occur, say that they've survived long enough to get the implant that gives them laser dot eyes or something, and the impact it has on them, and in effect them having to choose the path that they take through this thing. But their little group is basically a cell or a unit of folks, and the idea of seeing how the characters develop through this would be an interesting idea. It wouldn't be for everyone. Hell no.
But there's definitely a style of game that would lend itself to that. I'm picturing something. There was a guy who used to run games when I was a member of the America Club at university all those years ago, who used to do these games where he would tell you a story for a while, and then there would be these are your characters, this is where you're sitting, go. And you'd kind of act out these little vignettes, and then he'd go back to telling you the story based on. Would be...
Tony?
Yeah.
It would be pretty constrained, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a valid form of game. It wasn't for me at the time, probably still isn't, but there's plenty of people who would like to play that way. It's more of a improv acting thing than...
So probably one of the indie type games would be our way to go.
I think it would be called Wasted Youth?
Misspent Youth?
Misspent Youth, yeah, that sounds similar sort of thing. Except that Misspent Youth is all about...
Defying authority?
Defying authority. Probably slightly less about that.
Something it reminds me of, oddly enough, is
My Life with Master than anything else.
Oh.
Oh, that would actually work perfectly. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That would be a...
Jesus.
Because
Well, as I understand it, My Life with Master usually involves it not going well for Master, because it is, as I understand it, a game about the struggle in each of the servants between their love and reverence for the Master and their hatred of the things the Master is making them do.
Okay, maybe I've misunderstood. Actually, no, I may be thinking of a particular anime-based game where the players are different maids, and the game is how well can you do your job while bagging everybody else to Master.
I think that may be Made, the RPG.
Oh, right.
My Life with Master is more... At what point does Igor snap and
kill everybody
and electrocute Dr. Frankenstein?
I take it back. Yes, My Life with Master would be perfect for this.
Yeah, I think the mechanic of My Life with Master is that as the characters establish connections to outsiders, real people, not the horrible sociopath that they work for, that gives them enough strength to turn on their master at some point. So yeah, that's... I don't think they may have love and respect for the Master, but that doesn't matter in the context so much. It may colour what they do, but yeah.
I was thinking if you were going with the less, if you were buying into the grimdark,
Yeah.
Because those last couple of ideas are people not buying into the Grimdark. If you were buying into the Grimdark, it just sort of struck me when you were talking about these novices or novitiates sort of raised up. It was something in one of the Cadfael stories.
Go Ellis Peters.
Indeed. I forget exactly which one. I think it's in the 5th omnibus, because it's the only one I own. So I don't know where it is anymore.
Probably in a box.
Yeah.
Probably, everything else is. There's a reference to somebody being, I've forgotten the term, but it's basically been somebody who has been raised into being a monk from childhood.
Yeah.
I think it starts with an O, but I can't remember what it was. There's a sort of a sidelong reference in there to it being something that had been popular for a while as an idea, and then was sort of losing its popularity as it was realised that this, in their context, just didn't work that well, because you end up with a monk with no life experience whatsoever. They have no way of dealing with anything
That doesn't.
outside of being a monk.
Yeah.
Contrast this with, you've got one of these guys travelling with Cadfael, who is
Has
the
had
very
all the life
opposite
experience.
of somebody with no life
Yeah,
experience.
Brother Cadfael was a worldly dude, as I understand.
Yeah, I heard from recollection
He was a soldier
He had been a
and-
soldier and became...
He became a merchant captain for a while.
Not sure.
Yeah, that comes up in some of the early books, that he rolls with a sailor's gait still. And he talks about coming back from Samarkand.
Okay.
Where he had a common-law wife for a while.
Fairly worldly dude.
Very worldly dude. Also really into setting people up. He's all about the romance, which is really bizarre in a guy who is supposed to be shut away from the world.
He's into the romance for everyone else.
That's very
I
true.
get the idea it's the equivalent of chick lit.
Yeah. That's very much how it feels.
I do remember reading the bit of one of the stories where somebody decides to threaten the interfering old priest, who proceeds to flatten him.
The interfering old priest used to be a rather active younger soldier.
Indeed.
And still tends a garden for the monastery. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, there weren't a whole lot of desk jobs in the...
This is a man who has not run to fat.
Yeah. Cadfael, brilliant organizer of things. Brilliant detective. Not a very good monk, it has to be said. In terms of sort of devotion to duty of a more religious nature, not actually doing that well.
Oh, well. But yeah, that would be a good approach to it, I think. Yeah, I suspect you may have to, if you're running it as... I have a weird feeling you couldn't run it too close to the Games Workshop canon of the worlds, because they always tend to be the superlative of everything, and everything tends to be completely extreme. So you may have to blend in some actual sort of possible things of having characters run through.
I think that depends on the books you run with, because you have people talking about, yes, we are totally the most superlative of everything, and it being obvious that this is the line these people have been fed from birth.
If you take their splat books as propaganda, I think you're probably...
If you read the splats as propaganda, then you can probably make reasonable human beings who are just slightly larger and slightly buffer than they should be due to the genetic tweaking that's been going on over the years, or just breeding systems.
I don't know. Some of them describe the extra glands they have so they can spit acid if they're so captured and bound.
Genetic tweaking over the years. We covered this.
If you go with the, as represented in the Caiaphas Cain stories, because there are the occasional space marines that crop up there, and they always came across to me as, should we say, calmly and quietly devout. In the same way that apparently a lot of commissars aren't. They are noisily and obnoxiously and in-your-facely, which I'm reasonably certain isn't an actual phrase, devout. Whereas, these the occasional ones who just come across as, we are soldiers. We are very committed to what we do. But we're still basically people. We might be twice the height of a normal person and be able to punch our way through a bulkhead, but we're still basically normal people.
It's a high church, low church kind of approach.
Yeah. Kind of, we are, as it were, not so much the cutting edge as the punching fist of the Emperor. And, we have, in some cases, a kind of a tolerant, amused respect for these tiny creatures who are picking up guns and going into battle. Because it can't be easy for them, because look at them. They're so tiny.
And noisy. Let's not forget noisy. That's going to get him shot.
To be fair, I saw an excellent YouTube of somebody putting on cosplay Terminator armor.
Ooh.
And the initial process of getting into the legs.
Oh yeah, because the stance is effectively, I am riding an invisible horse in that thing.
Yeah. The fact that you could assemble this armour around a person frankly shocked me, because I always assumed that the illustrators made it look good, but I wasn't certain if they'd actually put a human figure underneath all of the parts. Because like the pauldrons, the shoulder pads, like twice the size of, each of them are twice the size of your head.
Yeah, the top of the shoulder pad is about equal with your temple.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the legs... Yeah, I don't know how many of our audience has never had the problem of an air gap between their thighs when they're walking, but these guys, there's a significant air gap and a whole lot of armour.
Which tends to imply that these people's legs have actually been taken off so that a whole new pelvis could be put in.
It gives one that impression, but no, this dude was in quite authentic-looking Terminator armour, which is the chunky salsa version of Space Marine armour. It looks pretty awesome, so I'll dig that video out just so people can have a look-see at that. And he was actually able to move, which was also amazing.
It was made out of foam.
Foam, fiberglass, all the normal stuff that cosplayers put stuff together. And, it was like, yeah.
Ooh, completely off topic, and it just reminded me something that Ben will probably be interested in. I saw a thing in the archives of Make where somebody had made a cardboard model of Ava 1 that was completely articulated.
Wow.
And could transform into a motorbike for no readily explainable reason. But it was cool. Anyway, that / off topic, we're back
to be honest...
We're leaving that bit in, right?
Oh, totally.
Yeah. To be honest, if something needs to make no sense and transform, it transforms into a motorbike.
Yeah.
Also, audience, we apologise for the increased background noise. It's
pissing down out here.
in the vernacular, yes.
Yeah.
It is fair pissing down in our leaky house. Sorry, no, it's not a leaky house. It's a house that leaks. We were told this by the rental manager.
We'll probably have to clarify that for overseas listeners.
I don't know. I think it tells you quite a lot about the rental manager just that way. Because if it's a leaky house, well, there are legal and health issues. But if it's a house that leaks, well, it's just a house that leaks.
And that was all you needed to know, really. Okay.
Also, it's kind of dissolving more than leaking, as far as I've seen.
Oh, you're just saying that because bits of the walls have the consistency of damp cereal.
Yeah.
I was going to say damp wheat bix, but I'm not actually sure whether that stuff gets sold outside of Australasia. Audience, does it?
Tell us. We'd like to know.
Sort of a compressed wheat biscuit? They kind of dissolve when you get them wet to cereal?
Not always. Sometimes you get the milk on them and they stay crunchy.
Those are the best kind, but yes.
Anyway.
We are so off topic. Okay, sorry about that.
Continuing off topic for a moment, our comment threads are open, so if anybody out there has responses to the ideas that we're having, responses to cards that we've put out, or you run games based on the ideas that we've come up, we really want to hear from you. So go to the site and tell us what you think.
Drown out the spam bots. I'm begging you.
Alternatively, send us an email and we can arrange for you to record your marvellous idea and we'll hack it into its very own show, along with anybody else who's had ideas. Kind of like that plan. Yeah.
Well, it does sound like free content to me, so...
Indeed.
Yeah.
So do we have anything else, or is that...
Yeah, I think we're done. No one else is...
Kev did mention before he went back to bed that he had half of an idea about somebody being raised by Astral Wolves, and that was as far as that idea went before the giggling started, so I'll just leave that lying there.
Raised by Spirit Wolves. Admittedly, I'm getting kind of a Stranger in the Strange Land Heinlein vibe.
Really? Okay. I was getting kind of an X-Men vibe.
Ooh.
Kind of a, this is your origin story thing.
Yeah, it could be a particularly freaky 70s superhero character.
Part Kitty Pryde, part Wolverine, all weirdo.
That's a mind-numbing thought.
Part shamanic.
Ooh, nice.
Somebody who interacts with the spirit world as though it was the physical world.
Nice.
Somebody... well, depending on how ridiculous action hero you want to go, you potentially have a member of the team who can leap into action, leap out, and punch you right in the soul.
Literally. Nice.
Yeah. Hand goes right through you. Yeah. Punches you right in the self-worth.
Indeed. And since it's vaguely contemporary, has anyone seen the Moon meme?
No.
I have.
Somebody posted one of those things where, what's your wolf name? And it has...
your first letter of your first name and your last letter of your last
first initial, last initial, and it had a list for each of them. and somebody got the one which repeated twice, which was Moon. So, oh no, my wolf name is Moon. I'm that one wolf that no one wants to invite to anything. It's like, oh no, Moon's here. It's terrible. Moon the wolf.
And people have been finding pictures of a group of wolves where one of them is in the process of doing something really stupid. It's sort of they're in the air and sideways because a snow drift blew an icicle up their bum or something. And it's sort of like, damn it, Moon.
I've seen that picture. It's like, I forgot how to dog.
Yeah,
Yeah, that picture.
pretty much.
The expression on this dog's face is very much a, no, blue screen. And the other guy, the guy who's been collided with, is a, what the fuck just happened there?
Yeah, it's very much a, damn it, Moon. Should we call it there?
Yep, definitely.
All right. I hope that was entertaining.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, take care, folks.
Next time on the Big Red Couch.
Oh, wow. This is drawing number 10
Wow.
for
Big Red
the
Couch.
Big Red Couch.
Milestone achieved.
This looks like my handwriting. And I'm a little bit dubious. It says Neighbourhood Watch in the future. So that's the idea.
Want to hear more of our shenanigans? Then go to hoarde.net and click on the button that looks like a couch. The Big Red Couch is released under Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share-alike 3.0 Unported from creativecommons.org. All music on the show comes from the album Universal Fluff Theory by Krakatoa. Visit them at krakatoa.com or follow the link from our page. See you next time!